Can you hear us? Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Kaysville Power Board meeting and ask if someone would like to do the opening prayer.
I can do it. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we have this opportunity to meet together and discuss these important topics for the city, and we ask that Thou would bless us to make wise decisions and to make progress in these things, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. And Jordan, if you want to turn that around. Yeah, that was for earlier this, yeah.
Okay.
Nobody's on there.
Should we start with an update from Susan?
Yeah. Just got a call this evening, and it was from Sean Chilcote, and he wanted to let everyone know that he would be missing tonight and possibly the next meeting because he said he was having problems with his vision and went in and got it checked and found out there's a tumor on his brain. And so he's going in for surgery this week, and so hopefully he'll have a positive, diagnosis on it, and will be back with us next time. But he just said he wanted everyone to know, and so anyway, maybe we can send him a card or get well something, and I'll just let everyone know. I'll go ahead and plan that and let everyone know on that. So the U of U, he'll be up there. So
Okay. I think we're going to dive in with a conference call. Or is Mark ready, or should we?
I told him I'd call when we were ready here. So.
Okay.
oh, okay.
We just need to put a mic on for that
Okay.
too.
You can use this one again.
Okay. Did we have an extra microphone up there last time? Seemed like,
I believe they shared.
is that what it was?
Yeah.
Hello, Bruce.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Good.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll turn you way up and we'll see if... Okay, I think we are set whenever you are.
Okay. Well, you got the presentation from last time. And what I was going to do is start on page 8. This gets into the solar valuation. So how's everybody doing there anyway? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone's here but two of our members right now, so we're good to go.
Okay. Now, a little history on the solar study. Initially, UAMS had hired us to do a solar valuation study for them. So we based it on UAMS data and UAMS peaks. And I believe it came out, when we applied that data to Kaysville, it came out to like $3.82 of lost revenue for every KW of solar installed. And subsequently, we decided that we should apply it and make it specific to Kaysville. And so we did that.
Can you stop for a minute, Mark?
People.
Mark, just a minute. Can everyone understand him okay? It seems like he's muffled.
It's a little muffled for sure.
For some reason, you're sounding a little muffled. Let us see if we can do something. I don't know what it is,
Okay,
but
is this better? I took it off speaker. I had my phone on speakerphone.
I don't know if it's on your end or our end, but you're coming through. It's hard to understand you.
It's like in and out.
Yeah, it's like you're coming in and out.
Talk again, Mark.
Okay, I'm going. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me Could you do me a favor, Bruce? Maybe it'd be better. Let me give you another number to call, if I could. And I think it'll work out better on this number.
Okay.
Okay, it's 1-712-775-7035.
3-5?
And 35, and the conference code is 144861 pound.
Okay, we'll try that one.
Okay, I'll call it out. Thanks.
Yeah, I was thinking, at first it was just me, I'm like,
No, I was
I
doing
can't
that too.
understand him. So.
Did that make
I-
any sense to you, what they've got going on down there? If they
So it
lose,
sounds like a redundancy concern, if something were to
Well-
go down.
this goes back to the 30s.
So what he's talking about is what, about
This service is provided in high definition by freeconferencecallhd.com.
St. George. And 13 is a common voltage for
Access code accepted.
rural areas for whatever reason.
You are the only participant in the conference.
Be helped their distribution voltage would vary.
Slow jam.
Elevator jam. I want to go shopping for cereal now. My page 8 didn't come through.
This is, I'm looking at it, so it is the, okay.
I think so. It's
I just want to get on the right one.
He was starting on page 7, didn't he say?
yeah, page 7.
But
No,
that's
it's
about
page
all
8.
I understood of what he said.
Oh yeah, page 8. You're correct.
It's page 8.
Page 8.
That's page 8.
Here, I'll pull it up here.
No, I'm reading it right there.
Okay. Are you guys seeing the? Are you guys getting the information on Dropbox? Okay.
No,
So this is really
Well-
handy. So you can see.
I need to check that.
No, we're in. We've been in.
So then the agenda's there, the mission
Okay.
statement.
That went right through.
Oh, bless you.
There's also. Let me see. I think that's where they're coming from.
UM's conference info.
Oh, right here. Stacy puts it all together in here. Have you been to the Dropbox? That's what I'm just showing.
Is there a way to tell what's changed? Get a notification that you know what's new.
So it'll, on the Dropbox, if.
It says how long ago it was updated.
Oh, just check the date then?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has, so anything for the meeting
Okay.
for like April 4th. If you go in there, Jordan's presentation's in here, this PowerPoint presentation is in here, so if anybody wants to write on the same one, we can even just duplicate it.
Oh, okay. Hold on one sec.
There we go. Get the volume turned up. Okay, go ahead and talk, Mark. Let's see if we can hear you better.
Okay, I know I can hear you a lot better.
Oh yeah, that's much better.
Yeah, that's a lot better connection.
Yeah, this is through my computer. Before it was on my cell phone. What I have and what I want, last time we had the meeting a month ago, we went through about 7 slides on our cost of service results. And the other part of the study that we did related to the valuation of solar and basically how to try to reduce or prevent the cost shifting that occurs when somebody installs a rooftop solar array in the house. And if you start on slide 8, slide 8 is your current program. And right now, Kaysville uses something called net metering. And what that is if the customer, say, takes 1,000 kilowatt hours from the electric utility, but gives back, because they're the rooftop solar array, they give back, say, 600. They're only billed for 400 kilowatt hours. And what happens, the problem with it, is they're using 1,000 kilowatt hours on the distribution system. And they're creating demands on the distribution system. So the sizing still has to be the same whether they have solar or not, because what happens is residential customers tend to create their peak demand early in the morning or early in the evening, but solar produces in the afternoon. So solar doesn't reduce a residential customer's impact on the distribution system. So what happens is, we recover that cost, but we have to recover it from other customers. And it's a cost shifting that occurs. And then there's a question related to the fairness. So I don't know how many in the room have been involved. I think we've had 3 other meetings actually, with City Council and also the solar companies. And they took the report, they read the report, and City Council asked to put together some different alternatives for consideration on what to do with solar. This is really, it's becoming a big issue in Kaysville, but around the country. In California, they have a lot of the utilities you work with in California have over a 5% market penetration of rooftop solar. Matter of fact, later this week on Friday, I'm flying out to Guam for this exact reason, because Guam has such a high impact of rooftop solar, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with these issues. So, but the program that Kaysville currently has, the net metering, was set up probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, and a lot of utilities implemented it, and public service commissions kind of pushed it because they wanted to promote solar because it's good for the environment, and there's no denying that it is good for the environment. But the dilemma that it creates is the cost shifting. And so if you go to slide number 9, slide number 9 kind of gives you an idea of what kind of cost shifting occurs when somebody installs rooftop solar. When we first started doing work for Kaysville, I don't remember, Bruce, it was like 100 kW or 200 kW of solar you had in the community. And then within 6 months, it just grew and grew and grew. So if you look at this table, at 700 kW of installed rooftop solar, what's happening is there's a 0.3% increase in rates to other non-solar customers, which creates a 25-cent impact monthly on bill. Well, that's not substantial, not a whole lot to be concerned with that at that level. Right now, I believe when this study was completed, we had 1,000 kW of installed solar. So basically, that was creating a cost shift, an increase in rates of 0.4% to non-solar customers for 36 a month. And the question is not so much, okay, we can handle a certain amount of this cost shift and, help the environment, it's good for it's good for the environment, and it doesn't create a big impact on customers. But as it continues to grow with this program, all of a sudden, cost shifts significant money. So, for example, at 4,000 kW of installed rooftop solar, that's a 1.8% increase in non-solar customers, or $1.44 per month. And of course, as it continues to grow even beyond that, cost shifting just continues to get more and more. And this is the issue that utilities around the country are facing. And they're trying to move to other ways, other methods to reduce the cost shift and the impacts of the customers. So the City Council directed both us and the solar company to develop some other solutions. And I want to go through those solutions with you because I think one of the big things that as a power board we can help with is to make a recommendation to City Council on how to handle the rooftop solar array. And if you go to slide number 10, slide number 10 is really the pros and cons of your current net metering approach. The pros of it is it definitely promotes rooftop solar installations. And you could easily continue with current practice of crediting retail rates at an amount of solar. However, it does create caution. So the cons of that is, and I hate using the word subsidy, but in reality, that's what it is. The non-solar customers are providing a subsidy to customers that are installing rooftop solar. And unfortunately, it's not low-income customers that are typically install rooftop solar. It's the more affluent customers. So it's creating a cost for more affluent users in the community. And that subsidy amounts to $4.51 per month per kW of installed solar. So if a customer installs, say a 10 kW solar array at Rum, that's a $45 subsidy that they're getting from other ratepayers within Kaysville. And these were developed specific to Kaysville's, that's your actual number, it's $4.51. So but that isn't necessarily an alternative. You could continue with the current practice. Now, before I go on to other alternatives, is there any questions about the net metering program?
Hi, Mark. This is Jordan Stevenson here.
Hey, Jordan.
So so the $4.51 is probably where I have most of my questions and where I feel like right now I want to kind of verify in my own mind. And I know that later on in the presentation we get into more rate design concepts and how to collect that $4.51. But before moving on, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to vet the $4.51 and make sure we do our due diligence as a board to be able to say, yes, the $4.51 is reasonable, we agree. And I know that there's a lot of analysis that went into that, but would you mind if we just spend a little bit of time on some questions with that $4.51? I'm just trying to get...
Oh, absolutely.
So as I think through that cost of service for solar customers, I'm just wondering about the avoided costs that you brought into that and coming up with the $4.51. And in my mind, there's three main functions, and you may approach it a little differently. So, but I'll try to share it in my language, and then you can share it in your language and see if we kind of agree with each other. And if not, that will at least help me see where differences might be. But the way I see it, you have your generation costs to serve, and then your transmission, and then your distribution, and then customer-related costs, right? Would you agree that that captures the majority of costs? So I'm wondering, on each of those 4 categories, when a customer feeds electricity back into the grid, there could be some economic benefit to the grid from that in each of those 4 things, right? And so I'm wondering if we could go through, like, I know this might sound kind of challenging to do over the phone, and I'm sorry to everybody here for the I guess we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but so on the generation side of things, what kind of avoided costs do you attribute to those solar customers producing electricity? Just talking specifically about the generation coming into Kaysville City.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, I want to tell you a little bit of history on it. There's different ways of determining it. One is on long run marginal cost, which is operating cost the cost to operate and install the next generating unit. And then the question becomes, how much by the installation of solar will it either reduce the sizing on that unit or delay the installation of the unit? So we initially looked at UAMPs in total. And we said, okay, the next generating unit, which was a combined cycle gas generating unit, with a total installed cost of $1,853 per kW. We then took that number and we said, okay, how long is it gonna, what's long is the life of the unit? In this case, we used 30 years. And part of the reason we did that is I was actually trying to be as generous as I can to solar. The reality is units typically run over 38 years, 35 to 38, but I used a more conservative 30-year value. And then I looked at what the carrying cost was of that generating unit, as well as the fixed operation maintenance costs. Then there's reserve capacity requirements because it's not a 1-for-1. I mean, if solar reduces our demand by 1 kW, that actually avoids more than 1 kW at the generation, because we have to have reserve capacity of 15%. So 1 kW at solar reduces the generation capacity by 1.15. So we looked at that, and then we looked at Kaysville's system and how Kaysville's system, when Kaysville's system peaks compared to when solar is producing. And when we lined it up and we used solar data, radiant data, it's over a 30-year period, so it's fairly accurate as far as solar production. And so in the month of January, for example, because solar is not producing at the time of Kaysville's peak, so there's no capacity benefit in the month of January for the installation of solar. But when you get into the summer months, like May, June, July, August, September, solar is producing at the time of the system peak. So it's about 1/5 of the solar capacity. So, for example, if somebody installed a 10 kW solar array, about 2 kW was actually producing at the time of the system peak in the summer. So we looked at what that 2 kW is, that example is worth, based on what the long run marginal cost is of the next generator. Am I getting too deep? Do you want me to slow down or?
No, I don't think so. I think you're good.
Okay.
You're good, Mark.
So that was one. We'll also look at transmission. And transmission is different because you get your transmission different Pacific Corp. Who provides your transmission? Do you remember?
I think it's Pacific.
Who runs the transmission system?
The transmission.
It's Pacific Corp, he said.
Pacific Corp. It is. Okay. We looked at, because how transmission is billed is your bill transmission not at your peak, but you're billed at the time of Pacific Corp's peak. So we then had to look at how much solar was producing at the time of Pacific Corp's peak. And so from a transmission standpoint, again, in the winter months, it really doesn't hit the transmission peak. But in the summer months, it actually did. You know, for example, in the months of May, June, July, August, about 50%, actually a little over 50%, of the solar capacity was reducing transmission peaks. So a 10 kW solar installation, about 5 kW would be producing at the time of your transmission peaks for the purposes of how you build transmission. So we looked at how much it's going to reduce it and how much transmission costs are, which is about $2.73 per kW to build. So we talked about how we determine the value on the generation side and the value on transmission side. Now, when solar is installed, it's installed at the customer level, of course. And because it's installed close to the customer, system losses are reduced when solar is installed. So let's say that the average system losses are 5%. That means that Kaysville has to purchase 5% more energy than what the customer needs. But when it's produced at the customer level, those losses are reduced substantially. So we give solar additional value based upon the savings on system losses. Then we get into distribution costs.
Can I pause you for a sec, Mark?
Costs.
Sorry, Mark, can I just pause? I had a question on generation and transmission. So you mentioned that you looked at the peak demand on generation and then the peak demand on transmission. Are those different times? Because it seems to me that they would be the same. Is it different in your analysis?
They are different. And the reason they're different is because you are billed by UAMPs based on your individual peak. But for transmission purposes, you're not billed on your peak. You're billed on how much you're using at the time of Pacific Corp's peak.
Okay.
It's called coincident billing.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right.
And I think just to add to that, Mark, this is Brock. The other thing that you're seeing is the solar windows adjusting in January, February, March. So when the sun's down, it's sliding with that peak. Is that right, Mark?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You're peaking when solar is not producing in the winter.
And just real quick, this is Brock again. What times are we peaking? Can you just go through January through December and tell us when we're peaking and approximately that value?
I have to pull up another file. Let me see if I can locate it. System loans, maybe this is it. Sorry, it's a really big file, so it take a while to open.
That's okay.
Come on. I may know I pulled up the wrong one. It has to be system loans. This is about 20 megabyte file, so it takes a long time to load up.
Maybe while that loads, just a question. I just read in your slide, it says, and this is slide 9, it says that there's 1 megawatt of solar installed as of 2/13. Is that, where are we at today? Is it still pretty close? Okay. Okay.
What is it, Bruce? I still, because this was done, well, it was done a month ago. You're growing pretty fast. You're higher than 1,000 right now.
What was that, Mark? I didn't hear you.
You over 1,000 right now?
Yeah, that's what we said. It's just a little over, Bruce said it was just a little over 1,000.
Okay. Yeah, this is what the system peak is. The times of it, so we have different, it looks like on average, a typical year, in the month of January, you tend to peak about 7 o'clock in the evening. In January and February. In March, you peak actually about 9 o'clock in the evening. In April, 10 o'clock in the evening. And then in May, you peak at 6 o'clock in the evening. So the solar is still producing. And pretty much throughout the whole summer, you peak around 6 o'clock. And then in October, it goes back up to 9 p.m. And then in November, December at 7 p.m.
And will you run through those numbers with the peak, the megawatts as well, please, at 7, January, February through December? This is Brock.
All right. The peak is about 23 megawatts in January, and about 21 megawatts in February, 19 megawatts in March, 18 megawatts in April, 25 megawatts in May, 40 megawatts in June, 41 megawatts in July, 40 megawatts in August, then it drops to 30 megawatts in September, 20 in October, 23 in November, and 26 megawatts in December.
Perfect, thank you. And a quick question for Bruce. I know we have 7 contracts that we've are engaged with. Do we have a megawatt range of how many contracts?
With percentage of output, so
Okay.
If it all come together, we have IPP too that we're not taking right now, but we have about 53 megawatts of capacity right now.
Okay, perfect.
Available.
Perfect. Okay, I think we're caught up, Mark, if you want to keep proceeding there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, now the solar company asked us for some alternatives also. One of the things they asked is, they said that they're not opposed to an upfront charge for rooftop solar. In other words, an installation charge. But I don't think they were quite prepared with what it would take to eliminate the cost structure. So alternative 2 was an upfront charge that was requested by the solar companies. You got to remember, it wasn't just solar companies that were opposed to what we were trying to do. It was also, there were 2 people from the state of Utah in the clean energy or clean air division, I think. Do you remember what division it was, Bruce?
Yeah, it was Utah Clean Energy and Vivint Solar, yeah.
But if you go to slide number 12, and you go down to the bottom, in order to keep your existing customers from not shifting costs, they would need to charge $735 per kW of installed solar. So if somebody installed a 10 kW solar array, they would have to be charged an additional almost $7,400 at the time of installation of the solar array to prevent that cost. So obviously that's quite a barrier to, if you go to slide 13, it's the biggest problem with that is the cost barrier to customers that are installing the rooftop solar. Now, another approach, which is on slide 14, is, and this is kind of, another extreme really, but it's just to eliminate the rooftop solar and charge customers $4.51 per month for every kW of installed solar. So if they had a 10 kW solar array, they'd be charged an additional $45 per month to prevent cost shift. And of course, it's a pretty substantial charge. And this is how the rate was calculated. It goes slide 15. Your average rate, residential rate, is 9.429 cents. The avoided cost value of solar, which is down in the center part of this table, is 5.54 cents. So that means that for every kilowatt hour of solar array that's produced, there's a cost shift of 3.88 cents occurs that other customers have to pick up. The average solar array in Kaysville produces about 1,400 kilowatt hours per year. So that means that for every kW, there's about $54 under recovery annually, which if you took that number divided by 12, you would come up with $4.51 per kW of cost shift for every kW installed solar. They would have to charge to eliminate the cost. Now, slide number 16 is, some of the pros and cons. The pros is it eliminates the subsidy that occurs if it flows through of solar, prevents any additional rate increases under other customers. And you have to remember, Kaysville is as all of UAMP's members, are not-for-profit utilities. So we're just setting rates to pay the bill. And if we don't charge the customers properly, some customers properly, other customers have to pay the bill. You know, it's not like we can just absorb this because we're not-for-profit. It has to be passed on. So now the other pro of this method is it's a fixed monthly charge, so it simplifies the billing process. But the biggest cons of it discourages the installation of rooftop solar. And of course, anybody who does have rooftop solar, they're going to see a large increase in the bills. That was alternative 3. Now, one of the things that I looked at is it's kind of a variation from that alternative 3, but saying, you know, we can absorb some of the cost shift. You know, I'm sure if you were to survey all your residential customers and said, would you pay, do you pay more money on your bill, electric bill, help the environment, they'd probably respond positively to that. But then the question becomes, how much more would you want to spend? And you know, if they said, I'm willing to absorb a 0.2% increase, all right, in my rate, then we could say we will subsidize solar up to $25,000 a year, which means that, you know, right now, you know, your subsidy is right in that range. So there'd be very little cost of their charge to customers of rooftop solar. In that example, it would be 70 cents per kW. That's not enough to cause a problem. But once solar exceeds that $25,000 cost shift, we're going to have to add on to the charge to bring the cost shift back down to $25,000. So what you're looking at here is what would be the charges at the different levels. Let's look at the 50,000 and go through this in more detail. If the council said we will subsidize $50,000 for solar, then that would mean that if you have 700 kW installed solar, no solar customer would be charged anything more. At 1,000 kW installed solar, then all the solar installations would be charged 34 cents per kW installed solar. At 2,000 installed, it would be $2.43, and at 4,000 kW installed solar, they would have enough to charge $3.47 per kW of installed solar. Do you follow how this would work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, the council would say, you know, solar is good for the environment. We feel it's good for the community, it's good for the economic base of the community, but we want to limit the impact that it has on other ratepayers. And this is a method to do that. You know, if you wanted to say, if the council said $100,000, which is a 0.82% increase on other ratepayers. So, in other words, customers wouldn't see any more than 1% increase in their rates to promote solar. Then, in Kaysville, at 700 in 1,000 kW, of installed solar, they won't be charged anything additional. But at 2,000 kW, they'd be charged 34 cents. And at 4,000, $2.43. So, you know, and if the council decided at some future date they wanted to subsidize it more than 100,000 or more than 50,000, they could make that decision. Or if they wanted to bring it down and not subsidize it as much. You know, but to me, this is a good interim solution to the problem. Not an interim, it's a good solution. Just to cap the cost shift. Now, if you go to slide number 18, the pros on this is it limits the subsidy that rooftop solar customers are paying. The additional rate increases to other customers are predetermined and capped. Now, I'll make an example of that. Columbia, Missouri, which is since it's a college town, and they have a lot of professors on the board of directors that really wanted to promote solar. This is going back about 5 years ago. And my customers were doing it, they wanted the utility to do it. And they said, you can install, we want you to install renewable resources until it impacts our ratepayers 3%. So as long as it was less than a 3% increase in rate, they could continue to install renewable resources. And, you know, that's a way of doing it, kind of similar to what I did here. And it's worked good for them. Yeah. They have a lot of renewable resources, and we're pretty much right at these 3%. But that's an alternative. Now, there's cons to the alternative I proposed. Is you're going to have to look at this pretty much every year, and non-solar customers will see a small increase in their upgrades. And usually this review should be done about once every 2 years. Slide number 19 is, again, another alternative that we looked at was to say, how could we use the upfront charge to, in conjunction with a monthly KW charge? So if you look at this table, if you read it across, we charge them $100 per KW on the installed solar cost. In addition to that, if you go further across it, where it says monthly charge per KW, $2.06. Then the cost shift at that level would be $1.84. And we just put this table together just to give you an idea if there's any way to balance an upfront charge with a monthly charge per KW. So if you look at this, an upfront charge of $400 per KW in conjunction with a $2.06 charge per KW would eliminate the subsidy. So, but this is another alternative to look at, a kind of upfront charge and a fixed month charge. So on this table, because this one's a little bit more complex, do you have any questions about this? Or anything?
Right. Mark, I have a quick question. This is Brock. And it's more on market. Are you seeing more of the upfront charges being implemented? I know that would allow a larger tax credit to be taken, so I think that would be more advantageous and more well received. But is that more common practice than a monthly charge?
No, it isn't actually. There are some that are giving a very small charge, but it's really just a licensing charge just to set up the account. We haven't really seen utilities actually implement much of an upfront charge. It was something that was discussed. The solar companies wanted us to look at it. And, you know, to me, it's another tool. I won't rely on it too heavily, but it is something that we could implement to some degree. Part of the reason I won't want to rely on it too heavily is even though it eliminates the subsidy, say that $700 for KW would be the upfront charge, if we actually did that, we would get an influx of revenue a year that the customer installed it. But every subsequent year, we're going to have a loss. So it doesn't really balance. You could potentially lead to violations of your bond covenant. And so that's what concerns me about relying too heavily on an upfront charge. But it is something that we could do, at least to some degree, if our board, subsequently the city council wanted to do that.
Okay, that's very helpful. And one other question, you know, looking at your sensitivity analysis on slide 19, I think it's just helpful for everyone here to understand, you know, what $4.51 looks like from the solar side, right? $4.51 per kW. I just want to go through my logic with this, Mark. $45 essentially on an average system is what that would look like per month, right? We're averaging.
I don't know if isn't the average around 7 kW groups or wrong about that?
Just quickly, I just took your kilowatt hours per year. 10 kW produces about 14,938. So it should be really fairly close. So about $45. And then I took the 9.2 cents that you had there. And that, I think that a 10 kW system, you know, 14,938 times the 9.2 cents produces about $1,344. So it's roughly about a 40% decrease per year on a solar customer on 451. So I just want to make sure that that math seems right, so everyone here can be close there.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow what you said. So it's a 40% decrease in, or increase in the bill, or decrease?
So the solar an existing solar customer that has a 10 kW solar array,
yeah,
would see a decrease of approximately $541 of revenue.
Okay.
That they would be that they're currently getting, which would be about 40% of what they're getting today. So that gives you perspective of where those numbers of, you know, a 206 number or a 451, you know, what's fair and what's not fair is what we have to determine. But at least, you know, 451, you're essentially sinking the return on investment by approximately 40%.
Yeah.
And that's just with the upfront charge, if we were to go that way? Or are you talking about?
No, that's monthly.
That's just a 451 monthly charge. So, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong. What you're saying here is on a week, if we charged a $100 upfront charge, we could decrease the 451 to 206. Is that accurate?
Actually, no. To eliminate the subsidy, it would be $3.90. So on the right-hand side.
Okay, so $3.90, I see. So then you're still subsidizing. So you would decrease with an upfront charge of a $100 one-time fee. We would decrease to $3.90, and that would essentially net that out.
Okay.
Correct.
And explain the bonding to me one more time, because I personally like an upfront charge. just because it's a utility fee. I just want to understand I don't know that I got that, of your concern of having that, connection charge, if you will. What was the concern there again on bonding?
Well, what my concern is, and I'm probably being overly conservative on it, but when you issue your revenue bonds, and those revenue bonds require that the cash generated from operations is a certain multiple of your debt service payment. Usually it's like a 1.2 coverage. So if you have $1 million debt service payment annually, you have to generate $1.2 million in cash. Well, we have to do an upfront charge if you rely too heavily on it. In a year that you receive it, you're going to record it as revenue. But each subsequent year, you don't have that revenue coming in. You got it up front and you reported it in that year, but the bond rating agencies don't care about that. They only look at that individual year. And so there's some concern. Now, I don't know if there would ever be an impact or have an impact in Kaysville. You're a relatively low debt utility. I mean, it's you'd have to have an awful lot of solar for that to have an impact on your coverage ratio. Could it happen? Yes.
So
My biggest concern is the barrier to the installation of solar. But you make a good point I never thought about, that by charging it up front, they can get the tax credit for it. That's a good point I never thought of.
So the other thought to the bonding, just thinking through that a little bit, would be obviously the discount rate and the cash. So if we were to escrow cash and put it in as a one-time fee, obviously that would help our bonding. So essentially we had a fund and we didn't spend that capital, we could dedicate an escrow account where that money would go in, and that would help us for reserves. I'm trying to understand, obviously what I'm thinking in my mind right now is if I was to take a 451, and I'm kind of doing this on the fly, so bear with me, but 451 times 10 for a 10 kW system, just for easy math, times 12, it's $541 is what that yearly fee would be. Warranty life is 20 years, so basically there's about a $10,000 subsidy for solar. So, I'm just trying to think of what the industry would like on that and see on that. Obviously $10,824 up front is substantially better on our books than, $2 or $4.51 over a month, discounted out in net present value terms is what I would say. So just thinking that through, the $10,824, if we brought that NPV back at your 4% discount rate that you were modeling, and then in addition took the federal tax credit, the $10,824 would be, right off the top, $7,576 that the customer would see, plus the discounted cash.
12.
Correct.
If you want to go to slide 12, you'll see it there. Be $7,350.
So that was just a thought. Obviously, we're I think some questions, and this is super helpful. I think one of the questions we had last time, and just following up on if we could get into the model and the data, I think we're definitely going to want to see the due diligence so that we can come to these conclusions as well. So I think I believe that we'll be discussing our next topics in the coming minutes, or coming probably hours here, but I think that's going to be one of those. So if just to follow up on that model, I think that'd be very helpful for us if we could see that as well.
Okay. Sure. You do have the solar report, correct?
We do. We have this report.
Okay. The solar companies also proposed some options. Item 20 is to increase residential customer charges to $5 per month. That would be $5 a month. Remember the cost of service that he says should be over $13. And by doing that, it does help reduce the subsidy, but not substantially. It drops it from $4.51 down to $3.91. So there's still a pretty substantial cost shift that occurs by increasing the customer charge rate to $5. We're still substantially below what the cost of service they said the customer charge should be. But that was one of the options that they proposed. They also proposed to include a fixed charge per kW of installed solar. But rather than doing it the way that we did it, what they wanted was to charge $1 per the first 3 kW of installed solar. And that was one option. Another one was to charge $1 for all the kW. But what that would do, it was $1 for the first 3. So 3 kW, they would be charged $1 for that. Now anything above 3 kW, then they'd be charged $1 per kW. So for example, if it was a 5 kW system, they'd be charged $1 per month for the first 3, and then on 4 and 5 kW, would add an additional $1 for each of those, for a total of $3 per kW. That'd be a monthly charge. That would reduce the cost shift by an additional 60 cents. In looking at
Hey, Mark,
slide number 20.
you're coming in and out again
That
there.
would reduce, I'm in and out.
Yeah, try that. I think. Could you repeat? Just maybe come back just a few minutes or 30 seconds.
Sure. If we did it, this is option 3. If we did it this way, it would reduce the cost by an additional. So, in other words, increase the customer charge to $5, and then on top of that, charge $1 per kW of installed solar, which would reduce the cost shift from $4.51 down to $3.31. Now, with reducing, at least the solar companies acknowledge that we have a really good deal in Kaysville, but it's still creating a cost shift. And if you look at the green, at 1,000 kW of installed solar, the percentage increase to non-solar customers is 0.3%, which equates to a monthly dollar impact of 26 cents. Now, if you go up to the right-hand side of the table at 4,000 kW of installed solar, the increase in non-solar customers' rates is 1.3%, or a little over $1 per month. At least they were acknowledging that there's an issue. Obviously, there's still a subsidy, a pretty substantial subsidy. But, maybe there is some sort of combination One, the elimination of the subsidy, which, you know, might be a little too strong to do, but maybe something like, you know, what I've currently proposed, which is to just set a subsidy amount, you know, at least that they're acknowledging it, you know, and we can maybe work with them to set where that, how much we're willing to pay to have solar installed. Is there any questions at all with solar company options?
Just out of curiosity, have you, Mark, this is Brock again, have you seen anything done, structured with a price per kilowatt hour analysis versus a price per watt?
No, it'd be really hard to do it that way because what solar companies attempt to do, if they use 1,000 kilowatt hours in a month, ideally they want to install a solar array to give you back 1,000. So their kilowatt hour consumption is 0. So they wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't be able to recover anything because their kilowatt hour consumption is so low. And then you'd also have to create a new rate structure for solar customers outside of regular residential. And that could also lead to a whole other set of issues.
Okay, yeah, just one of the thoughts that I've, you know, been playing with as we've been thinking through that, obviously, is a price per watt. You know, when you only have a capacity factor of 18%, just wondering if, you know, if there's been a structure of price per kilowatt hours. It'd be interesting to see if anyone's done that.
No, nobody's done that.
Okay.
Some of the different things they've done around the country, they put demand charges on all residential customers subject to it. And the reason they did that is a demand charge will impact solar customers more so than it will regular residential because the load factor drops. The reason the load factor drops is you still create the same demand on the system. They don't use a lot of kilowatt hours. So when you implement demand, residential customers that have a solar array, they'll see an impact on the bill than other residential customers. So that's one of the more common methods of trying to reduce the subsidy is with the demand charge. Another one, like the Salt River Project, for example, what they did is they created a separate rate class for solar customers and put them on a demand charge. Just solar customers had a demand charge. And the reason the project did that is because they wanted them to have solar to be west facing. They wanted it to be in a certain direction because solar project obtained more benefit from solar installations that were west facing than they did east facing solar.
So on that note, Mark, it's Brock again. Would it be advantageous? So looking at the subsidy over 20 years, it's $10,000. What's your experience with cost of battery storage?
It's coming down, and I can't tell you. I'm not familiar enough to tell you what the cost is. Other than I just put together a slide presentation for Guam when I'm going up there on Friday. And my research identified that you know these batteries are going to drop like another 20-30% over the next year or two. I mean, they're dropping substantially. It actually, solar is dropping 40% between now and next year. That's what the projections are.
So that being said, I think that's something we would like to consider. Me personally would like to consider, if we have a 7 p.m. peak, 7, 9, 10, 6s, 9, 7, 7. Obviously, the analysis would be what happens when we were to back up 7 kW of solar, or 10 kW of solar. Where does that number trend to if we were to switch and put in, if say that was a requirement in place of a fee? Is that something that'd be more advantageous to the grid? Because then we can do voltage ride through, frequency shifting, those types of things, and pick up some net benefits back versus just charging a fee. Is that something? I know that's kind of trending in new territory.
Oh, no, that's actually what utilities want, exactly what you're saying. They want, and that one way to incentivize that is with demand charges, because that will give more economics to the installation of batteries. Because when they install batteries, what will happen, if it's batteries will charge in the afternoon, and then when the customers come home in the early evening, they'll be able to draw down on their batteries to reduce their peaks. And in the ideal world, the batteries would be just basically controlled by the utility themselves, because if the utility needed power, they could call upon the battery. But that's a dispatchable battery is, that costs even more. But basically, a battery, there's definite value to the utility to have batteries installed.
Okay.
By the customer, not by the utility, but by the customer.
Right.
And demand charge is the best way to incentivize them.
Okay. I think that's very helpful.
All right. I have one last slide here, and it has to do with right-sizing the solar array. And even the solar companies admitted that you don't want a customer to substantially overproduce some solar. I mean, you want the solar array to be right-sized. And, any kind of at some point in the future, you probably want to put something together, some policy together, to basically right-size the solar array. So if somebody has they're a 7 kW home, for example, you don't want them to install a 15 kW solar array. You want them to limit it to their needs. So they, to their maximum annual demand, for example. If that's 7 kW, then they can install a 7 kW solar array. But you want to make sure that there's some limit on the sizing. So most utilities are implementing some sort of rate sizing program for solar array customers.
And that's just the percentage of their usage, or is that percentage of their lowest month usage, or what's recommended there?
Well, usually the utility will do a certain amount of analysis. A lot of them will base it on an estimate of the maximum demand of the customer. But that's kind of sometimes hard to determine if you don't have a AMR system out there to identify the demand of the customer. So then they might limit it to the total annual kilowatt hour consumption. So if the home uses 10,000 kilowatt hours over the course of the year, then the solar is limited to only being, producing in a sense 10,000 kilowatt hours or some percentage of it. What you don't want is large amounts of solar installed way above their usage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think what we currently have, and you probably are aware, Mark, is there's a credit that builds up, and then at the end of the period, it just disappears. So I think that's kind of a built-in incentive in a way not to generate too much, because you're just going to lose that credit come April. Is that right? Alan's shaking his head. I may have that
They do
wrong.
not lose it. They get
Yeah, you're right.
a credit
You are
for it.
correct.
They get
That-
paid
that
for
would
it.
be
Oh, they get paid for
After
it.
they've been on for that full year cycle.
Oh, so
Right
it's
now,
the opposite of what I just said.
Yeah, we're about the only ones in the state that do that, but.
Oh, okay. I was probably thinking of the
And
state, the.
That's the current agreement.
Big
Every
brothers.
customer gets paid for it.
Gets paid their extra at our average wholesale cost for the prior 12 months, so.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's what a lot
Okay,
of
so average
people
wholesale,
do.
so it's not the retail rate, but they do get,
6.5% this year,
okay,
or 6.5 cents this year.
okay.
But some utilities will say if you overproduce, you don't get any credit. There are some out there that will do that to try to prevent oversizing the solar arrays.
So, just a quick question on that as well. I think that common trend I've seen a lot of utilities move to monthly distributions and monthly payouts. Why would that trend be, why people are heading there? I know that instead of a net meter program, they just are moving to a trend of paying per month.
Going mostly to a feed-in tariff where you.
Well, what they're doing, I think, and I'm speculating, is they're putting in net billing, which means that if a customer uses 1,000 kilowatt hours, and they give you back 600. How their bill is calculated is like this. The utility will charge the customer for the 1,000 kilowatt hours they pull from the electric utility. They will credit them for the energy they get back at avoided cost, which would be, in your case, around 6 cents kilowatt hour. So that, in a nutshell, zeroes out every month, so there's no carryover, because we're not going to credit it against the retail rates. Because anything they get back is valued at 6 cents. And net billing is actually a very common way. And I'll be honest, I got into renewables about 15 years ago, and when I first started doing it, that is how I put the structures in place, because it made sense to me. But, and it still makes sense. But a lot of joint action agencies and electric utilities around the country think that a buy all sell is a more ethical way. And and that kind of, matter of fact, when I teach these classes, and I'll oftentimes ask the question, is buy all sell all, which is what I'm proposing here, or net billing, I feel is the best way. And about 50% say net billing, and about 50% say buy all sell all. Nobody says net metering. But it's kind of split down the middle between those two methods. And the industry hasn't standardized on it.
Okay, that's very helpful.
But this is probably, in my opinion, your biggest issue to tackle, rate perspective. Not the cost of service. That was not an issue so much with City Council. And what we were proposing was relatively modest adjustments. But the solar array is, and what to do with solar and the net metering program was the one that generated the biggest amount of consternation with the solar customers in the state of Utah. And, you know, to me, that if you can help City Council to, one, help them understand it and be comfortable with their decision. Because you're talking about the electric industry is most definitely the most complicated industry that exists anywhere. with generation side of the business, the transmission, the distribution side of it, and what that customer charge represents, how solar impacts the inverters and the transformers and everything on the system. It's the most complicated industry that exists, and not everybody can have a PhD in development here in electric generation, and to help them be comfortable with the decision is the best thing. Because otherwise, it's the best thing that in my opinion, you can do right now. I don't know. Bruce, you might disagree with me, but I think this is a very difficult decision. It wasn't the rate.
Can you repeat that, Mark?
What's that?
Can you repeat that?
You went out.
You went out there.
Well, what I said is it wasn't the rates that I felt was an issue with the city council. It was the net metering program changing. That's the one that created the biggest issue with, I don't want to say your ratepayers, because it really wasn't. It was a few of your ratepayers. It was the people that had solar, and it was the state of Utah, and it was the solar company. We had a lot of people that came up and spoke to us. Any kind of a change in the net metering program. And, like I said, the electric industry is very complex, and to making a decision on that is, I think, what City Council is really looking, I believe, for your recommendation on how to handle the net metering program, and should we subsidize, and if who, to what degree?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're trying to get our arms around. So this has been very helpful, Mark. Again, just to follow up, it'd be very helpful for us, just so that we know we're doing the right due diligence here. If we could get I think all of us would want to come up with the same conclusion of, get into the math just to come up with, hey, $4.51 is the right number. So I think that's going to be probably our next big task. So if we can get that, and then we can dive into that number. We may have some questions of how we get there, and then obviously with that, if you have any modeling on 8760 data, we're going to be overlaying the 8760 data with our power curves, which is what your peaks are. And it sounds like you might already have that data as well. And then just see, what the impacts are. I think once we do that, then we can start making recommendations. But this has been very helpful for us. And I guess maybe just go around, just for the sake of your time and everyone's time. Is there any questions here that we have for Mark?
No, I'll be excited to see some of the, well, maybe not excited, that might be the right term, but I'll look forward to seeing some of the underlying data. It's a little hard over the phone, Mark, and I apologize for asking you to send that to us, because I know it represents a lot of work product for you guys. There's some, underlying theories about how to do it that I just want to understand what went into it, especially about some of the avoided costs that we talked about earlier a little bit. So I'll look forward to that, and then make note of any follow-up questions. So.
Okay. I think the report, I had all of it in there, but I'll check that. So. I'm
sorry, what was that?
I know why. I think the report when it had everything in it, including all the calculations, but I'll go through and see that. And
so maybe I missed another report. When you say report, you're not referring to this PowerPoint. You sent another report that has all the backup calculations. Maybe I just didn't see it yet.
Yeah, that was, there's a report.
Okay, maybe in Dropbox. I missed that or something.
I didn't see it.
It was something he presented to the council a long time ago. Is that what you're talking about, Mark? You talking about something you reported to the
What's
council
that?
a long time ago? Is that what you were referring to?
Correct, and I don't know, it's possible. I actually issued another report on February 16th of 2017, which was specific to Kaysville.
Okay.
And I'll send you this. Maybe I didn't send it to you, Bruce. I'll send this off to you.
And obviously, Mark, if there's confidential stuff, we're happy to recreate our own models as a team here. I just think that it's going to keep us all on the same page if we can have at least a good starting point. So if there's confidential stuff, we can understand that. And we're capable.
I will send you this. Actually, this has all the curves and everything in it too. Well, I'll send this to you, Bruce. You can forward it to, and try to send it out right now.
Okay, that'd be great, Mark.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, Mark, we appreciate your time this evening, and we'll definitely have some more questions as we proceed here.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time also. Dedicated. You guys have done a lot of work on this. Take the time to understand it. It's great. So, all right. Well, thank you. And if you need me next month, just let me know.
All right, thanks, Mark.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Intermission.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to transition to a presentation by Jordan. I think that you'll be queued up here shortly, and I'll let you take it from there. You may have to stand at the podium.
Yeah, I'll probably stand over there so I can follow along here.
Do you need a laser pointer?
Do you have one?
Do in that closet. I think that's where she lost.
Well, that's okay. I'll just point and you guys will know what I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
It'll be okay.
Do you have a key?
I'm mobile. I can walk over there if I need to. So, thanks. Is Bruce clicking for me?
Yes.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. So I tried to put up here how much to expect. We'll walk through and build up some slides. Basically, the background to this is I came into this with kind of my rate-making background at the public utility and thought through what are just some, when I first heard about this issue from Mark, it was a similar call like this, and we heard a lot of the final results of what he had done, but didn't have a lot of the background, and maybe those conversations had happened long before I was involved, so I apologize if a lot of this is repetitive, but this is just kind of a high-level overview of some rate-making process that goes into coming up with like the $4.51 and specific for the electric industry, and just some things that I thought would help give us kind of a framework to work through as we try to vet these numbers. So go ahead on to the next slide. So, and I'm sorry, there's some suspense built into this, so you might have to click several times. But I've got just a few steps for rate making. The first one's coming up with the revenue requirement, which is just the total cash needs for Kaysville's utility. And you've got your O&M, depreciation can be included in there. You could look forward. I think Mark was saying we want to have $4 million on hand any given year, and so you can build that into your revenue requirement, and then any repayment of debt that's going on. And so you just come up with that for your total revenue requirement. Go on ahead to step 2. The next step is how are you going to divide that revenue requirement up and allocate it to the specific customers? And so that's called the cost of service step. And so you'd come up with how much residential customers would bear, how much commercial customers would bear, and then finally the industrial customers and any other customer classes you might want to designate. Some have actually advocated creating a separate solar customer class all on its own, and so that goes into kind of the cost of service study. And then finally, the rate design is how you actually collect that cost. So it could be, we're just going to do it all as a flat fee, or we're going to do it as volumetric rate, or kind of a combination of the two. And so that's, go ahead and click one more time. There's kind of an analogy here that I refer to. So the revenue requirement's like the total pie that you're trying to collect from customers. The cost of services, you're segmenting it into specific groups. And then ultimately the rate design is how you actually go about collecting it. What are the tools you want to use to get there. So on to the next slide. So talking about step one, we kind of covered a lot of these things, but operating expenses, and I've just noted here that you could have several different categories for those. It's generation expenses, transmission, distribution, customer service, and billing, and that goes into the operating. Go ahead to the next bullet point here. You've got your administrative expenses, which is like your office supplies, administration, salaries, and things like that, insurance. On to the next one. That requirement's kind of self-explanatory. You can keep clicking through. Depreciation, other capital needs, and you add all that up to come up with your revenue requirement. Go ahead and click on. I think that's a little repetitive. So we start with the revenue requirement over here on the left, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, where we come up with the $4.51. And I've got an idea that I put up here about some ways to do it, and that's what I was trying to kind of ask Mark about, to see if my ideas are consistent with his ideas. And so first what I would do is take the total revenue requirement and I would organize it by the main function of what those costs are doing. So we talked about how that total revenue requirement on the left has O&M in it, and capital costs in it, and administrative, and all these things, and what specific parts of our operation do those fees relate to? Does that cost relate to? And so we segment it by generation. Go ahead and click again. We have transmission functions, distribution, and then I would further segment it by how that cost behaves. So on the generation side, we may have some variable costs and then some fixed costs. Go ahead and click again there. And so what I would do with this is try to figure out what is driving these costs. So if a solar customer, we say that there's a subsidy going on. What's causing that subsidy? And the reason there would be a subsidy is because we are not shedding as much cost as we are revenue, right? We are losing revenue, we're saying, but the cost isn't also tracking the revenue in the same manner. If they were equal, there would be no subsidy. And so the costs aren't behaving the same way as our bill is behaving. And so can we change the rates somehow to match up better with the costs? So the only way to do that is to understand exactly how these costs behave in reality. And that's what the goal of this is. So we take our generation-related costs and come up with, what of this generation varies with usage. So as I reduce my consumption or my kilowatt-hour usage, are there costs that decrease with that in our generation? And when I look at it, I think there are. Go ahead and click one more step. And I would kind of organize these costs into buckets. So I have an energy bucket. Go ahead and click again, Bruce. So the variable costs I can come up with in generation, one example is fuel. So if I don't have to generate as much electricity, and I'm sorry, I'm not in the electric industry, so if this is wrong, I mean, this is just a framework, and then obviously there may be differing opinions about how these costs behave, but the way I see it, if you don't have to use as much natural gas or coal because your total output decreased, that would be variable costs that you were able to shed and avoid because customers use less or because solar customers generated their own electricity. Does that make sense so far? Okay, then you have fixed costs that in the short run, fixed costs don't vary, but in the long run, they do. So your generation plant requirements may be reduced in the long run because your total output decreased. And one thing Mark, it sounds like, did is looked at our upcoming plant replacement. We're thinking of replacing one of our plants and tried to figure out how much of that fixed costs in the long run do we get to avoid because of the impact of solar generation. Go ahead and click one more time. So the fixed cost doesn't all vary based on energy usage, though. So, for example, if I were to cut all of my energy usage down to 0 by net metering, but yet between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, I still was using a certain amount of energy. It might look like, from a total output perspective, that I don't cost anything, but in reality, we'd still need a generation plant in place for that peak hour, right? And so to capture the costs accurately, we would need to allocate a portion of those fixed costs to a peak demand bucket. And go ahead and click one more time. And so we would take all the costs that are fixed, and we'd have to come up with a way to say how much of that is related to just our total energy output, and how much of that is related to our peak demand requirements. And one method that I've seen for doing that, and I know what Mark did is looked at the actual plant replacement coming up. One method I've seen is a load factor, and go ahead and click one more time. And what a load factor is I take my total peak output in a given hour, or for my peak hour, and I divide it by my average use, and so there's a ratio. So for example, if in my peak hour, I am using, or actually, sorry, I should have rehearsed this a little more before presenting it to you guys, but if on an average, in any given average hour, I am only using, say, 40% of what I use in my peak hour, then there would be a ratio there, a load factor. And I'd say 40% of my infrastructure is there to serve the total output bucket, but the other 60% is there to take care of my peak demand requirements. And that's how I would kind of allocate those fixed costs into those two buckets. Does that make sense? That's one method. To me, that method makes sense. It doesn't sound like Mark used that method, so that's why I was trying to question him on generation. How did you do this replacement plant? I just want to kind of understand the methodology and see if it makes sense. It may end up giving us a very similar result if we were to do it this way and Mark's way, but it's just one way to kind of vet his number and make sure we agree with it. Moving on to transmission, we've got similar analysis going on.
Just a quick question on that.
Yes.
So, and maybe this is for Bruce, but is there a way that we could use that method and to get the numbers and come up and compare it with what Mark came up with? Can somebody do that for us?
We'd have to look into what factors you're talking about. But we don't have a lot of variable, well.
Or is that something, Jordan, is that something like you could do if you had the numbers and you could figure it out, or?
Yeah, so I've got some numbers from Bruce. I was asking Bruce for some numbers, and he pointed me to some numbers he had already provided that I was missing. But we've got some UAMPS bills that I've looked at, and then we've got a balance sheet, some numbers there. The balance sheet isn't to the level of detail where I could see what's generation, what's transmission, what's distribution necessarily. Maybe there is some detail that I am missing, but maybe what I should do is follow up with you guys on how the numbers are actually in the accounting system. And obviously you summarize it in the reports, but what kind of underlying fields are there that maybe we could go after to give some of this level of detail? I assumed Mark probably had that level of detail already. That's why I was kind of asking for what was in his model, because I thought he's probably got a lot of this lined up already. And then I could just kind of see if he's doing it the way I would, and if he's not, kind of do my own and see if it compares. But
Yeah, because
so
I would like to see that. I think that's a good method to look at.
Yeah, so maybe when he sends that, that may give us that level of detail we need, and if not, we can follow up. On the transmission, a very similar process I thought you could use. In variable, I don't know that there's any variable costs in transmission, and I may be wrong, but it seems like if I reduce my usage as a customer, the transmission from generation to the distribution system doesn't change at all. There's no fuel being used, or I could be wrong. Can you think of any variable cost?
Megawatt, so
You get charged from UAMPS by megawatt?
the transmission is charged, yeah.
It's not fixed at all? Oh, okay. So maybe it's all variable. So I probably had that wrong. But again, on the fixed, I would split it into how much is going into peak and energy, and you can click through that. Same kind of method, you could do it based on a load factor. But if we're billed based on just total output, then maybe it just goes 100% to total output and there's no peak demand cost to transmission. And then moving on to distribution, same kind of thing, except for now we've got to add a new bucket for the fixed costs and distribution, because there's a portion of our costs that aren't there to deliver energy necessarily, but just to serve customers. And so go ahead and click through that. We've got, for example, meters, service lines, we've got a billing department, we've got meter readers, we've got customer service, and those are the things I would put into a customer. So those are the costs that vary with customers, not usage. So if one more customer comes onto the system, we incur that much more cost to read their meter and to send them a bill. It's not necessarily related to what they're using, but just it varies with customers. And then the rest would be split similar to the other two, where we have some of it related to total output and some of it related to peak usage or peak output. And you could split it based on the load factor. And so after doing all of this, your total revenue requirement, that blue there over on the left, would be divided into all of these things, and you'd end up with 3 categories of costs: energy-related costs, peak demand-related costs, and customer-related costs. If you added those all up, it would equal your total revenue requirement, if you're following, if that makes sense. And then once you have your costs, you know exactly how your costs behave. You could determine, okay, is our billing reflecting the behavior of that cost? And currently, I think our bill is pretty much 100% energy. And you can see the problem there. If I reduce my energy and I'm being billed 100% on energy, then there's these fixed costs that should be related to customers and peak demand that I'm kind of getting a break on, because the bill is kind of set up that way. So go ahead and click once more. The last and final step of this whole process would be coming up with what we think would be the most effective way to collect these things. So the energy portion of my costs, I would come up with $1 per kilowatt, very similar to the way we do it now. We just take the total energy dollars divided by the total kilowatt hours that we project in the year, and we would be able to collect that amount from customers that way. The next one, you could do a demand charge. Mark talked about that a little bit, where you say, what is the total amount in my demand-related bucket? And I'm going to come up with $1 per usage in the peak window. Maybe there's from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we decide. Or it sounds like it goes as late as 10 p.m. Or maybe it's a seasonal, maybe it's only the summer peak that matters. Maybe we come up with a window that qualifies as the peak usage window, and we say we're going to come up with $1 per kilowatt hour used in the peak demand. I think what Rocky Mountain Power proposed in their most recent docket is we're going to look at your highest average hour in the peak demand window, and we're going to charge you a peak demand fee for that average hour that you use. So in July, if my highest average hour was 10 kilowatt hours, my peak demand would be based on that, for example. And then the customers, we just look at the total dollars of our total revenue requirement that's in the customer bucket, and you would divide that by how many customers you project, and that's just a flat monthly fee. It sounds like Mark has it at $13. And depending on what's in that brown arrow down there, that could be higher or lower. It seems like he's doing a minimum distribution system analysis that brings that up to 13. Personally, I feel like it may be closer to $8 or $9 if we included just customer-related costs rather than energy-related costs. I know that there's different kind of theories about how to do that, but so that's the process that I would walk through. So I have a little example here of how this would work in real life. So for this one particular customer. So go ahead and click through this a little bit. If we chart the typical customer's usage, I just drew this in PowerPoint, so this isn't very pretty up there, but That's kind of the average typical customer usage. It kind of goes up a little in the morning and then dips in the middle of the day, and then in the evening it peaks. Would you guys agree that that's kind of the curve we see? So then we have a coincident peak window that in our distribution system, that's when the peak is, and then go ahead and click one more time. If this is a net metering customer, we could potentially see that we're net metering in the middle of the day quite significantly, and then maybe by the end of the day, the solar isn't generating as much, and there's a peak there. That's kind of the swing that Mark was talking about with the load factor. So how would this relate to the billing principles we just talked through? So if you click through to the next slide, go ahead and click one. What would happen is the generation side, the variable costs would decrease. So go ahead and click one more, because we still avoid those costs even with that curve we just looked at, but it's the fixed costs that give us the problem. So go ahead and click one more. The portion of fixed costs that we said are related to total energy would be avoided. Go ahead and click that. But then the fixed costs related to peak demand would not be avoided because they still had to use during peak demand. So if you click one more time, you can see what the impact is there. Oh, we've got some arrows off to the right. So I'm showing the bill would go down on these. It's kind of hard to see, but there's these arrows over here indicating that the energy portion of my bill would drop because of my generation. But then go ahead and click a couple more times. The peak, oh, sorry, go back one. The peak demand charge would be unchanged because I used just as much in the peak window as I had been using anyway. There was no change in peak. Now, if I had a battery and that curve actually stayed low in the peak demand, then my bill would reflect it and I would be okay. So if our bills were set up this way, everything would almost flow normally. You could not worry about having a specific class just for net metering customers or anything, because however much I use in the demand window, my bill would reflect it correctly. The costs would be avoided, the bill would be reduced, and it all just matches. They behave similarly on the billing side and the cost side, if that makes sense. Go ahead and click through. We do the same thing for the transmission. So maybe if you're a net metering customer and you have that curve that I showed, click through. The energy costs could be avoided, but the peak demand related function would not be avoided. So again, that would be unchanged. And sorry, I think I've got more arrows coming in. Keep clicking through. I think you guys get the idea with that. And then we can move down to the distribution system. And on this, I have here that none of these things necessarily would be avoided, because even though I am producing energy and sending it back into the grid doesn't go anywhere. I mean, I still need those wires there, for example, to put energy back onto it. That's not the case with generation and transmission, because my generation doesn't flow all the way back to the generation plant, right? So I don't need that infrastructure anymore. But on the distribution side, I still need that infrastructure. So there's no avoided costs. That's just, as I thought through it theoretically, what I came up with. What I would recommend we do is make sure we agree that this is how the costs flow. So go ahead and click through a few more times, Bruce. Sorry, I put a lot of clicking in here for you. Okay, go back one more. So you can see kind of how I've charted it there. There would be no change in my bill related to the distribution portion of my revenue requirement, but I could shed costs related to generation and transmission. So if we really understood how all these costs behaved and we crafted the bill in a way that, and this could be a long-run thing, you don't necessarily need to do it all just this year, but you could start moving that direction. We wouldn't need to worry as much about making changes to customers' bills, because it would all just kind of flow the way that costs flow. That's the idea. Moving forward, I should have brought with me, I have a kind of a work paper that I thought in a work group over the next few months as we talk about these things, we could just fill out and make sure we're all on the same page about how all these types of costs behave. It's kind of a table, a matrix. So let me get that and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Good. Thank you. What this is it's kind of a worksheet that I came up with to capture everything we just saw on the slides. So the first page is an example of what we could create. We would go through each of these categories, and we would decide, okay, for example, on the generation, the short-run marginal costs or variable costs. For customer profile number 1, do they increase or decrease? So if it's an energy-efficient customer where the peak usage is going down, total usage is going down, and they're not net metering, you just walk right on down that column and say, okay, my marginal costs are going down, my generation long-run marginal costs are going down, the customer costs aren't changing. I'd move down to transmission, do the same thing, and ultimately for each of these different customer profiles, we would determine how those costs behave. So it looks a little complex and intimidating at first, but I think it would be I guess what I'm proposing is that over the coming months when we schedule a workshop where we really get into the weeds, ultimately I would hope that we would come to an agreement about this particular sheet. And I think once this was filled out and we agreed on it, it would make the crafting of the bill a lot more understandable. And we may end up saying, we understand how the costs behave, but we don't want to charge customers that way because of various other factors that are also important. But at least we would know what the basis was and why we came up with that conclusion. So that's kind of my recommendation, I guess, as a result of this presentation. Are there any questions that you guys have? Okay, so that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. In fact, I love this just because I think that lets us actually see the numbers to make our decisions off of and recommendations for the council. So I think that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay. The next topic is the mission statement. I know that we tabled the discussion last month because we wanted to give it a little more thought. Is there any more thought? Do we want to keep it tabled? I'm just watching the time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if it's
For the mission statement?
for the mission statement, is that it?
Didn't we offer our input to Sean? And we went through and we kind of tweaked it a little bit. Alan added some things to it. I added some things to it.
That was,
Was that not the mission statement?
it's not the mission statement,
Okay,
that was on
something else. Okay.
That was for the newsletter, I think.
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had just one quick, I like it how it is, except for just one quick change. As a result of our tour, I had the idea that maybe we put safety in there. I thought you could just simply add it right at the beginning where it says, I don't have it up in front of me, but we talk about providing reliable, oh, thank you. Yeah, so Kaysville City Power and Light mission is to provide reliable electricity. I would maybe just add is to safely provide reliable electricity, just to show that that's one of the key objectives we have, is to have a culture of safety. I know it is already based on the tour, but I don't think it would be a bad thing to just add that one word. So that's the only suggestion I have.
Okay.
So if that's the only change that we made, then we can go ahead and make a motion to accept it with that additional wording, if you'd like to tonight.
So, is there any other changes, I guess, first? If not, then I'll make a motion to approve it with adding safety in the mission statement.
I second that motion.
Okay. I'll stay.
Okay, and then you can just go around and then you've got a first and a second, and then go ahead and take a vote to accept it.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay.
Well new at this, sorry.
It's a productive meeting.
That's
You're
right.
doing great.
Okay. The next topic is the election terms. And there was the email distributed on election terms. Do you want me to read through these now and see if there's any questions? Right now I have myself, expiration of 2021. Patrick, I think there was a typo on the email, of 2 of 2019. Jordan, 2 of 2021. Alan, February of 2019. Sean, February of 2021. And then John Lovelace, February of 2019. I believe here it states that you can, in 2 years, affirm if they want to continue to serve. So is there any issues with that? Anything we want to discuss? I can pass these dates around.
No, I've seen it.
Okay. So do we need to approve that then?
Yep.
Okay, so do we want to have someone?
So I'll make a motion to approve the election terms as outlined.
And I'll second the motion.
Okay, so now you can state that you have a motion made by council, or member Lee, and seconded by Hein, and then go ahead and take a vote.
Okay, so a little practice here, so bear with me. So I have a motion made to approve the election terms by Councilmember Lee and Mr. Hein. Now can we take a vote?
Aye.
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 This is productive.
And trust me, we're gonna go back to these recordings and see how I progress, so. Okay, good. So the next topic is the UAMPS conference. I know that there was discussions on whether we, as board members, needed to attend to that conference. I know that we also were looking for dates on that conference. Has there been any progress made on dates and
Yeah,
if you'd like us to
that should be in your packet also.
Okay,
The annual member conference is August 13th through the 16th, and that's in Squaw Valley,
In
California.
Olympic
Right
Valley.
by Tahoe, Lake Tahoe area.
So that would be August 13th through the 16th. And that's a 3-day?
Yes.
Okay. And then there is a municipal toolkit workshop, and that's a 1-day, September 12th, and that's held in conjunction with the Utah Leagues of Cities and Town Annual Convention. That will be in Salt Lake.
So if we attend these, there's, at our own expense to do this, or what?
No, I think it's...
Kaysville would pay, for your hotel and your travel. On the one that's the member conference, then there's no other fees once you're down there, the travel and the hotel,
All the food is usually provided.
all the other stuff is provided, for the conference, so no fees for that.
okay. So maybe what we do is leave it on the agenda for next month. Maybe everyone looks at their schedules, and then we bring it back to see who would like to attend. Is that sound good with everybody?
It's open for all of us
Yeah.
to attend that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, they don't need to know for several months who's going, is that correct?
Yeah, not for a while, I haven't seen anything yet,
Yeah.
they'll have to know, a couple months in advance, but.
But as we get closer, you'll be getting emails and you should get the information, so.
Okay. So we'll table that for next month, if everyone will just look at their schedules and see if that lines up there. The next topic is the regulatory assistant project training. And I distributed some information on the regulatory assistant project, and then also the 3 scheduled meeting dates. I know that Kate's here with Utah Clean Energy that can, if there are questions specific on that, I don't know if I can have her come up and talk about it, but there's 3 dates, April 13th, May 11th, and June 15th, and I think the conversation that we been offered is the opportunity to host the May 11th training here in Kaysville. It's grant funded, and they would come in and teach on grid impacts of distributed solar is what they'd be teaching on. April 13th is, just a step back, already has a place, and is that in Provo?
Yeah, they're,
Sorry, is that cool? I don't know the rules, so come on up.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a little bit of background on the trainings. We have worked with several utilities that are municipal utilities that are considering changes to net metering and have, questions about all sorts of, all of the conversations you're having about, what are the costs and the benefits, what are the grid impacts, and then how do we set, smart rates that encourage people to make smart energy choices. So that's a little bit of the background as to why we invited the Regulatory Assistance Project to come here to Utah to, hopefully work with all the municipal utilities that are considering this. So the first training is already scheduled. We have a location in Provo because Provo, as you may have seen, had a similar conversation last year, and they're interested in kind of continuing to talk about this. And then, we really do want to make it as easy as possible for the utilities that are actively considering these issues to attend. And so if you are willing to host the second one here in Kaysville and to allow other municipal utilities, representatives, city council members to attend, we'd love to have one here just to make it easy for you to come if you're interested. And the third one will be scheduled as a webinar regardless, so that one will be remote.
So to be clear, April 13th, May 11th, June 15th, 1 to 5 p.m., is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah.
the target. Solar valuation and cost benefit analysis on April 13th in Provo, and there will be a webinar for that.
Yeah, there will be a kind of a remote call-in option. And, the meetings will be structured as a presentation from RAP, from the Regulatory Assistance Project, and then the bulk of the time is really intended for kind of a Q&A and discussion. So, we'll do our best to broadcast that remotely, but the presentation certainly will be, will be easy to share.
Okay. And then May 11th is the grid impacts of distributed solar. June 15th is rate design, alternates to net metering. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Any idea how big of an audience we would, if we host it?
I think, a room like this would be plenty large enough. I'll know, next week how many people we're expecting at the first training, and that'll help determine, help guess how many we might have at the second, but, I would say I wouldn't expect a lot more than 20 or 30 at the most, and possibly fewer if we have people calling in remotely. So I think, a room this size would be plenty big enough. It's not going to be a huge crowd.
How soon would they need, or would you need to know whether or not we are going to host it?
We can find another location if you'd prefer not to host it, so it's not urgent. It'd be helpful to know sooner rather than later, just so we can look at backup options, but it's a month out, so there's a little bit of time.
Okay.
And one of the, I think, concerns that came in is, I believe that's the day that City Council meets at later, so we definitely would have to make sure we are out of here, the 11th and the 15th. And is June 15th an option if 11th is too soon to make a decision?
That's a good question. I think, I know that the consultants coming in from RAP have booked travel for April. They may not have booked travel for May, so I'll have to check and see if they haven't. We might even be able to change the date if that's helpful, or the time. So there's a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay.
Yeah, because we definitely would have to be done before 7.
Before 7?
That's when City Council.
Currently, we have it scheduled for 1 to 5, and I think, like I said, it'll be about a 90-minute presentation followed by a Q&A.
Okay.
So I think after 4 hours, I'm sure everyone will be plenty happy to wrap things up and get out of here. So I think that should be doable.
Okay. Maybe
Questions?
maybe through emails and whatnot, we can have a discussion and decide, and then we can let you know, and we'll let you know pretty
Sure.
quick, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And with that discussion, if you'll send all the dates that we discussed and make sure we're all informed on that. For some reason, I can't find when you said you'd sent those, and,
Okay, yeah, I'll
I'm
definitely
sorry.
recirculate it. No worries.
okay.
Okay, so next topic is just discussion items for upcoming meetings. So we've been trying to collect all of the discussion points. Are there anything that we want to put on the agendas for the next upcoming meetings?
I think we need to get some information from UAMPS on how to read their bill and what our resources are, how that compares to our load, our actual load. And I don't know if we.
Lamps said they'd be willing to come and do whatever we wanted to do, so we could set it up for next time if you'd like to do that.
Is that something
That's a good
that can be
idea.
done in an hour here, or do we need to
Depends on what kind of.
set up more
what
time
kind of
than that?
detail you-
Do a work session or something, or?
We can always start our meetings earlier if you'd like, if you want to keep it to our evenings, or if you want to do a work session, we can come in on a Saturday or during the weekday if people have time. I don't know with work, who can get off and do a work session, but we have those options. I don't know what all of you would like as far as what works best. If you can get off even earlier, we could start at 5. I don't know if that's a possibility. And then, just work it for several hours.
How much time do you think it would take?
Yeah, I was
typically?
going to ask Alan what,
What kind of detail you? could
I would imagine we could spend an hour on trying to understand the bills that we've received. And we need to get some information on resources. What do we have? What are our contracts? How is that comparing to our load? And they,
And I can get you all that stuff. We don't, we'd have that all, most of that information be done before a meeting, so maybe we could start at 6,
And use that to be the biggest topic of the meeting for the night.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that's our
Yes.
next step to figuring
yeah,
everything that you were talking about is knowing
Yeah.
what we're
understand how
doing.
those costs paid would be great, yeah.
yeah. So then the only question is, do we want to wait a full month on that? Because we've set ourselves a June 15th deadline, or June whatever,
So,
and we will already be to May
That's
before
true.
we have a
That's
full
true.
understanding of how all this fits together.
Yeah,
We could do a mid-month meeting. I'm looking at, let's see,
seems like, do we have one on the calendar?
I think we have the 18th on the calendar. Obviously, we'd have to see what there's, what UAMP's availability would be, and that would dictate. So maybe we could get a few times from them to distribute, if they could go that 18th, the week of the 18th, 2 weeks out or something.
That's the regular UAMPS meetings on the 3rd week of every month. It's Tuesday and Wednesday of every month.
So that won't work for them.
Okay.
But Alan, yeah, you send me the stuff that you want. Like I said, a lot of that stuff, I think, I can get to you without, having them.
Yeah, well, you might be able to get it to me, but I don't know that I'll understand it without some explanation.
Well, I can explain
And
to
that's
you.
probably the case with everybody here.
I can explain.
I was just wondering, I don't know if this would work, but we wouldn't be able to meet in here because it would be the night of the Planning Commission, but we could probably meet in the conference room, maybe, and go over it on the 13th. It's a Thursday. And call that our or we could see if we could get the police station room, the conference room or the big room over there if we need to. They've got all of the necessary things that we could use if we need it. But we could call it more of a work meeting, and would that work for you, that date?
Which day?
It would be Thursday, the 13th. And we could meet like at 6 if you wanted to do it at 6 and do it earlier, and if that works.
I'm fine with this, Thursday at 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
Works for me.
Okay, so we'll change our April 18th, and then so that I'm good on agenda, we'll see if we can get UAMPS to review.
April 13th you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the agenda would be just reviewing the resource availability and power bill review.
Yeah, yeah. Email me specific detail what you want, so they'll be, prepared for whatever you want.
Okay.
So what time are you
And-
saying that day?
6 o'clock, and do we want to just meet in the conference room in the back? Or
don't
do you think, we can call it a work meeting? Anybody who wants to can come back there, sit and listen.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, just as long as there has enough room to accommodate anybody that wants to go in there and sit down and listen to from the public, because we'll have to.
Right. I think that would be plenty of room. No?
How many seats are there? There's 8 of us.
Oh.
It's quite cramped with 6 people, so we're looking 8 of us, and then
Okay. Well, we can pick the police station. We can see if that's available that night. If not, the backup would be Wednesday, the 12th. I don't know if that's a little bit harder for some.
It's the same, 12th or 13th, is fine.
The 12th, okay, so the 12th, we could for sure meet in here, because there's no other meetings that I know of on the 12th. And I'll double check that with Shane and make sure. So maybe we should just do it on the 12th then. Would that work, Wednesday, the 12th instead?
wouldn't the 13th work also, though, too? Because council's meeting's not until the end of the month.
Right. No, I'm just saying for the use of this room. Then we could just use this room again. Because if we do it on the 13th, the planning commission's in here.
Oh, got it.
So,
My apologies.
yeah, that's okay, yeah. So would that be okay then, if we do it at Wednesday, the
Man,
12th?
I'll have to check their schedule, but.
Okay, yeah, and
wanna
just let me
tentatively
know.
Ask about the 12th.
Let us all know, and then we'll ask Shane if this is available in here, make sure we schedule this room.
We're gonna need, the agenda needs to go out, go later than the 10th. 10th
Okay,
is the last day we can get that out.
okay, so we'll know by then, right? You'll find out tomorrow if that works for him.
Yeah.
Okay, and you'll get that information so you can get this rolling.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it, yes.
Okay, so tentatively, we're set for Wednesday, the 12th, 6 o'clock. If that time doesn't work, 7, but Wednesday, the 12th.
Perfect.
Okay?
Okay, was there any others that we want to put on here just for topics so that they're there? I've tried to collect a list. I know that other topics for future discussions, for sure, we have the solar class outline from John Lovelace. And then we have the feeder monitoring that Sean was preparing, so we'll put that on the
Leave that for
docket, but
your-
we'll keep it a ways out there. Is there anything else that,
Did we want to talk about as far as what the city uses software-wise and, what maybe we look into that area?
The billing software.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
good.
Yes, if they're hand calculating some of these bills, I think
It's
we
about
need to
time
do
we look
something
into that,
different.
maybe? Okay,
Yes, I think that's a great idea.
okay. And then the only other thing I can think of is possible, this is going into the future, but the outlook for putting the smart metering for I know they're working on right now for the water meters, but I know that we've had discussions about that for the electric as well, so.
Okay. Anything else on other items? So just as a, putting a little more formal touch, if you'll just email me if you think of anything, I'll be collecting them, and then Stacy and I are working on getting these back in a timely manner. So I think we're getting there. It's a little rusty, just like my motions, but we're getting there. So if you'll just email me any topics, anybody has a topic, I'll just collecting the list, and I'll just keep this list going, and her and I will work on making sure we get it on the list. And it may be, you know, A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah. Is there anything from staff that we should be looking at? Are we missing something you guys want us to?
I think our big concerns is what you guys are working on or dealing with now.
Okay.
Okay.
Our big
Net
concerns.
metering rates, and then the AMI will be next on the,
Okay.
Okay. All right, and then, so I guess we'll just have you work to get the information to Stacy for the 10th, by the 10th,
Yep.
for this
Perfect.
agenda. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so next topic is the approval of minutes. And I think that personally, the big discussion is do we still feel like we're ready for a June 15th meeting with the, you know, city council presentation? That's in the minutes, and we already did approve it. And if we did want to take that off, now would be the time to take that off, I'm assuming, so.
I
Well-
think that's pretty aggressive, but
It is aggressive, but I think we still have another month to see if we're in the ballpark for that. If we're not, then at the next month, we should bump that.
Okay.
But right now, I think it's good to kind of keep the pressure on and move this along, so.
Right.
Okay. So, is there any other questions on the minutes?
No, but- well, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
And can I get a vote?
And you can just say all in favor, say aye.
Oh, that's even easier.
I'm
All in
just-
favor, say aye.
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 Perfect. And then the next topic is call the public. If there's anyone.
You're doing great. Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
And then I'll do a motion to adjourn, or how do I do that one?
Yeah, and I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.